Welcome to Bama Bug Fest on the Web, a virtual event dedicated to the fascinating world of insects. Bama Bug Fest on the Web is a collaborative event brought to you by UA Museums, the Mildred Westervelt Warner Transportation Museum, the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the Department of Research and Collections at the University of Alabama, UA's Rogers Library, and the Tuscaloosa Public Library. We are offering 9 total days of bug-themed content ending on July 25th. For a full schedule of everything that we're doing, you can just head over to bamabugfest.org and check it out. That'll give you a full schedule, and you can see all of the fun events that we've got going on. Well, my name is Rebecca Johnson, and I'm the UA Museum's Communication Specialist, and today we are going to be talking about Black Widows. And we have a full panel with us today, so we should probably go around and get to know everybody. And we'll start with maybe the most famous, the most well-known member of our group here today. She is a member of the Avengers, Natasha Romanoff, a.k.a. Black Widow. And if it's okay for me to refer to you as Nat, if I can, just for short. Nat, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. And it's totally okay to refer to me as Nat. The Avengers do all the time, and they're some of my really close friends. And you're a very good friend of Black Widow, so I consider you a friend. So, really good. So I am Natasha Romanoff. My actual name is Natasha Alianovna Romanova. That's how I was brought up, how I'm referred to, and then I adopted the name of Natasha Romanoff when I deflected from Russia and the KGB years ago. I trained in the Red Room and then was recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. after a few missions that went a little badly, but other than that, I was able to kind of show my loyalties to America. And after a little bit of time, I trained with the Avengers, and they accepted me into S.H.I.E.L.D. And now I work with the Avengers full time, and we stop a lot of threats. We pretty much save the world on a daily basis. We also have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, it does sound like you've had quite the journey from possibly bad guy to hero with the Avengers. So thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. And we also have on the panel with us today a scientist, educator, and arachnologist, Dr. Sebastian Echeverri. Thank you for being with us on Bama Bug Fest on the web today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me again. This is a lot of fun, and I'm excited to learn a little bit about Black Widow, the character.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on to talk about Black Widow, the spiders.
Yeah.
And to talk about Black Widow, the character, we also have Justin Snipes from the comic strip in Tuscaloosa, which is a local comic book store in the area, to help us guide us through Black Widow's comic book history. So thank you for joining us, Justin.
No, always happy to.
And Justin, I guess maybe the best place to start in learning about the characters, maybe talking about the comic books. So what was Black Widow's origin? What was her first appearance in Marvel Comics?
Sure. Well, she first appeared in Tales of Suspense 52. It's from 1964. It was an Iron Man book before he had his own solo title. And she was a villain. She was a Russian spy, which I think everyone knows at this point, but she was that was her original costume there, just an evening dress. And she recruited Hawkeye, who was also a villain, and they tried to be villainous. But they ended up becoming heroes because they were so popular.
Yep.
Did we lose Justin? Justin, you still there?
Yeah.
No, I'm back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. We lost you for a second.
Yeah, spam phone call. Isn't it great?
That's all right.
Yeah. So, Tales of Suspense 52, 1964, teamed up with Hawkeye, who was also a villain, to menace Iron Man. And after a few appearances, she started teaming up with the Avengers and then eventually joined them. She also didn't get that outfit that we all know and love until 1970 in an issue of Spider-Man, because in Marvel in the 70s, everything important happened in Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to start with anything because Spider-Man is very popular. And he's also a member of the Avengers, one of Natasha's teammates there. So that's a good place to start. And so I guess, are there any really famous stories with Black Widow in them that we should know about?
Well, that's the funny thing about the character is that she's been around so long, but she was always sort of teaming up with people. Her first solo title wasn't until the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Like her own actual title. Before that, she was in Marvel Presents. She ended up with Devil for 4 years. It was co-titled Devil and the Black Widow. It wasn't until the movie that she started gaining prominence, and a lot of it can be attributed to Marvel filing for bankruptcy in the 90s and selling off the movie rights to their most characters.
That's right. That's right. I forget that part of Marvel history is very interesting. And I guess Black Widow, I should ask you, do you have any favorite stories that are written about yourself?
Let's see. I really, really like a story that was written few years ago. It's by Mark Waid and Chris Samney. They wrote a story that was I really liked it because it focused a lot on my spy history, and it was very action paced. And I also like when people kind of get into my psyche and kind of figure out what makes me tick, and kind of what my loyalties are, what my background is, who I have feelings for, tap into those emotions little. And that story really did that very well, in my opinion. I also really liked the story that was written about me and another Black Widow named Yelena Belova in believe it was the early 2000s, I believe, because sometimes I have a hard time remembering. I have saved the world a lot, so sometimes it's hard to remember every single.
A lot of legends and stories. Keep track of.
I really rely on Hawkeye to remember things because he just has a much better photographic memory than I do. But that storyline teamed me up with Yelena Belova, also known as Black Widow, and it's really fun to kind of go through our history together. And we're both a bit of an antagonist when it comes to each other. So it's a little fun to butt heads in that way.
Yeah, I wondered if the Black Widows would get along with each other, if they would have, they would butt heads in any way.
I mean, where I was raised in the Red Room, we were all considered Black Widows. That was kind of a universal title, which is why people like Yelena Belova have a Black Widow title. I just became kind of the Black Widow, quote, basically because I came out of the program. I deflected to S.H.I.E.L.D., but also I was, not to toot my own horn, that I was raised to be the best, but I kind of was. But we all kind of compete against each other to be, kind of the most, most defensive, the fastest, the most skilled, all of that. So there was a bit of competitiveness.
But it's good to have goals and aspirations. Yeah. So what are your skill sets? What do you think you're the best at doing?
So I'm pretty much an expert at anything spy-like, any kind of stealth stuff, also, anything tactile. I'm really good at shooting, in battle. I have my Widow's Bites, which also known as stingers, so that's handy in battle. The thing about being, a Black Widow, I pretty much don't have Captain America's, super strength. I don't have, Iron Man's ability to, build all these cool things to put on my body. I pretty much just have what I was raised with and what I learned, which is my strength and my spy skills and my knowledge. And I just kind of use all that stuff in these cool little gadgets when I go out fight. And it's nice to have those real world abilities. It makes me feel very down to earth and know that I worked hard to get to a place where where I could use those abilities to save the world.
Yeah, that looks pretty dangerous. Adding on top of the fighting skills, adding weapons on your person, that seems like that would be really dangerous for the bad guys to face. So I would mess with you for sure. So
I want to say that is really impressive, right? In this group of like superhumans, demigods, you're holding your own using just peak human abilities and what you've worked so hard to do. I've always found that really cool about both you, Black Widow, and other characters that don't have the same superpowers that manage to keep up and do their own part in these stories.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, it's inspiring, right? Because that means that any one of us could also train and become a hero in our own way. You don't need to have that superpower necessarily.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about being Black Widow is that, I feel like she's really, really relatable. Obviously, sometimes I think it's hard to relate to her story of, growing up in a special spy school and all that. And I get that not everyone can relate to that, but I do like to think they can relate to my, my journey to work hard, to better myself, how hard I work on kind of, self-love and accepting, my mistakes and my regrets and working towards kind of building a better world and using my powers for good and all of that. And yeah, it's, I hope it's inspiring to other people.
Yeah, and Dr. Echeverri, so since we've kind of gotten to know Black Widow, the character, a little bit, what do you think about her portrayal versus real world Black Widow spiders?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that stood out because, I mean, I didn't know too much about Black Widow, the character, and I found it really interesting that you mentioned that there's an entire group of different people that have the title Black Widow, because that kind of matches the real life spider. So the Black Widow spiders that we think of are in the genus Latrodectus, and it's actually a genus that has 30 or so different species of spiders. And even here in the United States, we have multiple species of Black Widows, these black spiders with a red hourglass on them that are throughout the states. And so depending on where you are in the United States, you may have one or more different species of them. And so it's fun and interesting to see the diversity of different Black Widow characters matched by that of the actual spiders. Black Widow spiders are one of the only two species, or two groups of spiders, I would say, in the United States that are actually dangerous to people in any way. So 99.9% of all spiders that you see, their venom hasn't evolved to hurt people. Like, it just doesn't work on us. Our bodies are so much larger and they work so differently than the things that the spiders eat that their venom doesn't do much to us. Black Widow spiders are one of the very few. The only other type of spider would be the brown recluse, where their venom is actually strong enough to, if you were to get bit, to require a visit to the doctor. But even in that case, there haven't been any fatalities from these spiders in a very long time because we know how to treat them. And often the spiders don't actually inject venom when they bite. I find it kind of interesting that the character is based on this spider. Black Widow is this ferocious fighter with lots of stealth skills. You travel around, you infiltrate, and you do things like that. Well, the Black Widow is actually a pretty conspicuous spider. They're not good at hiding. They're shiny and black. They've got the same color scheme, but they hang out on a web. They stay on their web. And it's really easy to spot one. It's really bright, shiny black and that red hourglass. So they would actually make a pretty bad spy compared to the character Black Widow. And I think they may have the same representation as being ferocious, but everything that we know about these spiders says that they are actually pretty reluctant to bite or attack. So there was actually a study from scientists who were trying to see they wanted to get venom out of a black widow spider to study it. And so to do that, you have to get the spider to bite, a little collection cup or whatever. And they were like poking the spider over and over and over. And they actually the only way to reliably get the spider to actually bite was to hold it in place and like squeeze it and keep poking it. And even then, only half of the time did the spider actually inject venom. And so the reputation that these animals have is actually a lot more aligned, I would say, with the character as someone who's like, I can beat you up at a moment's notice, than the spider, who's most often defense to being poked or bothered by an animal is to kind of hide in its web, curl up, or maybe try to run away. So it's really interesting to see how the reputation of the spider has inspired a character where the reality of what this animal is in real life is kind of where those two have diverged, because the mentality and the name of the Black Widow is still out there, but there is this kind of disconnect between the real life animal that people might be afraid of and the character. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
I muted myself.
Okay, I was really worried my headphones had broken.
Well, I was just saying that it does sound like Black Widow spiders do have a little bit in common with Black Widow to what I know of Natasha here, that there are some parts of her that are, fighting for good and are willing to kind of, just act in defense, whether versus offensively.
Yeah, and I will say that idea of being a force for good is true of not just Black Widow spiders, but just spiders in general. So spiders are these predators of a lot of the animals that are actually pests or dangerous to people. So a lot of insects that eat crops that we would like to eat ourselves, or just trees that we use for shade, and even other spiders, mosquitoes that spread disease. Spiders are one of the primary predators of these insects that without them, we would actually be overrun. And so they're out there every day catching things in their webs that are no longer eating our crops, biting us and either irritating us or possibly actually getting us sick. And so I think in that way, I love seeing spider-themed heroes, because it really gets to this idea of, spiders are actually going out there and putting in the work to keep the rest of our lives, to better the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that does seem to be a good benefit. They're catching the things that would do us harm, would you say, or at least would be troublesome for us?
I think both of those. One of the main in history, one of these leading causes of death for humans in general is disease spread by mosquitoes, and a mosquito is a wonderful snack for a spider. And web building species like widow spiders are great at catching mosquitoes and flies and other things that are zooming through the air, and so they are reducing the number of these animals that are out there.
I did have a question about, Black Widow has a belt, I guess, if Natasha, if that's what you want to say, that has the Black Widow, what we would see as a sort of a symbol of a Black Widow. Dr. Echeverri, could you explain what that is?
Yeah. So.
Oh, you can. I was just going to show.
Yeah, please.
How my symbol is. I know it's I apologize to people watching that it's slightly bad angle I have in Avengers headquarters. It's a little cramped right now with quarantine, so I had to kind of find a place that was easy enough to get a few minutes.
Yeah, we're all working on subpar recording situations, and it's nice to know that the Avengers are also dealing with the same thing that we are.
Yep.
But yeah, that hourglass symbol is actually one of the reliable ways to identify a Black Widow spider. So I'll show you a photo of them. So the spider has the same symbol again on their abdomen, which is the kind of the second part of their body. So spiders have a cephalothorax, or I call it the head, which is this part here in front where all the legs are attached to, and the fangs are kind of here. And then they have an abdomen, which is where most of their organs are. So things like their lungs, their stomach, their heart, reproductive organs. And on the bottom of that is, on widow spiders, is this hourglass mark. And many of the species in the genus Latrodectus have that red hourglass on a black abdomen. And they will hang like that upside down in their web, showing off that symbol. And that is a way that the animal can tell would-be predators that, hey, my venom is slightly stronger. Please don't bother me. I don't want to have to use it, but I can defend myself if my life is on the line. And so I think it's a really cool, striking symbol that translates really well to like a character's motif. Because it has the same, that red and black coloration is really noticeable to us humans. Though I will say there are many other animals that cannot see the color red as different from green, but humans have evolved the ability to do so. And in particular, we've really assigned a lot of importance and meaning to the color red in our we've evolved to notice it a lot. And so it is something that is really great as a character design thing of catching the eye and drawing attention. In fact, there's a really interesting study that showed that humans actually have a preference for potential partners that are not only just wearing the color red, but even if they are presented on a red background, people are more likely to rate that person as more attractive because of this innate association we have with the color red as something desirable. And so I think that might be one of the reasons that a lot of superhero designs might use that color as well, because it's got that really cool connotation.
And do all black, I think it's really interesting that all Black Widow spiders tend to have that same symbol. Are there other spiders that have something like that, or are Black Widows the only ones?
In terms of having that hourglass, I believe it is primarily in the widow spiders, but there are other spiders that have bright colors, possibly to warn off predators or to pretend to be another animal. So there are, for example, spiders that have alternating yellow and black and white kind of lines in the abdomen. They're sometimes called wasp spiders because people think that that might be enough to confuse a predator into saying, oh, that's a wasp. I don't want to mess with a wasp because it might sting me. It's really interesting studying color in spiders because they come in all different shapes. I mean, there's a closely related group of animals that are shaped the same way called to the Black Widows, called the false widows. And they have a similar body shape, but they tend to be more brown and a little more drab. And less strikingly colored. So it might be that their coloration evolved more for camouflage than for warning, hey, you shouldn't mess with me. And that makes sense because the false widow spiders don't have that super strong venom that the Black Widows do.
So this, I guess, is a question for maybe everybody, if we can get Justin back. Do all the Black Widow characters in the comics have the same symbol on their belt? Does the costume change at all?
The one that everyone's familiar with hasn't really since 1960, because she had black appearance, a dress and a fancy mask, and then the red hair and the skin type outfit. Been pretty much the same, and all the different Black Widow characters in the books do have that symbol except Page One. People don't know she 6 times back in 1940, but comics was even a comic. It was called Timely Comics then, and her name was Black Widow, psychic, and her real name, and this is going to hurt me to loud, but her real name was Claire.
Clairvoyant? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Claire. Yeah, her first last name was Voyant. The fourth.
That seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, her last appearance, she sold her soul to the devil to avenge her death, and she hasn't been.
Well, that's
She didn't have the same symbol.
It's a way to go out.
Yeah, that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
So Natasha, do you have any different kinds of suits? Do you have different variations on your suit?
Yeah. So I have this is the suit I think that most people are familiar with. It's the one I wore when we all did the Battle of New York back in 2012. Seems like forever ago, but time passes. We get, as missions evolve, as the world evolves, as we learn more, and threats get more intense. I do change my costume a little bit. So my bites will change a little. For that particular suit, I kind of upgraded my bites a little so that they still have the same power. You see the little the shooters on the side, but the top is more of a it shoots out the stingers that way instead of shooting directly from the bites that normally have.
Can I ask you a bit about how those work? This is my own ignorance, but what do your spider bites do?
I just assume people know what all my powers are. So basically, by shooting, when I shoot from my bites, when I'm attacking or defending myself, basically it's just bursts of electricity. So these little jolts will they'll hit whoever. They'll stop whoever's coming after me. They'll kind of subdue whoever is coming after me. It doesn't necessarily, hurt people very badly, but just enough to, incapacitate them. And I mean, if I wanted to, I could probably be a little more deadly with them, but it depends on the situation. I try basically just to use them just mostly for defending myself.
Yeah, I think that matches pretty well with the effect of a Black Widow's actual venom on people, where it is something that is painful, but it's manageable. And if anyone who happens to encounter a Black Widow and is bit, a visit to the doctor's office means that they often have no real lasting harm, and it's not life-threatening. So I think that's a nice kind of matchup between the animal and the character.
And speaking of defense, I randomly got an email from Nick Fury. I don't know how he got my email address, but he's saying that the Avengers need to assemble to fight somebody named Thanos. I don't know what that's about. Sounds pretty serious. He mentioned something about Infinity Stones. So you might need to go help your team out with that. It seems like they're going to need Black Widow's help.
I think they might need my help with that. I kind of don't want to leave them to do that alone. I mean, Thanos is a pretty big threat to us, so I may need to go do some crime fighting duty.
Yeah, Nick Fury sounded pretty dramatic, so you should probably go help.
You don't want to mess with Nick Fury when he sounds like that, because I've known him for years, and I still, don't want to mess with him when he gets worried like that.
Yeah. Well, you should go help him and tell Iron Man we said hey.
Oh, I will. I will make sure he knows how cool you all are.
All right. Well, thank you for dropping by, Black Widow, and hope you save the world.
Thank you so much.
For having me. This was fun.
Well, Dr. Echeverri, so in terms of Black Widows, are they different? I know we talked in another live stream that we did with Spider-Man about their eyes and some of the ways that their bodies are and how they see, things like that. Are Black Widows any different than, say, like a jumping spider?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the many cool things about spiders is how different each group of spider is from another. So there are over 50 or approximately 50,000 species of spiders in the world that we know about. And Black Widow spiders and jumping spiders are really different. Jumping spiders, which are the ones that I study, so I will show you one briefly. They have these really big eyes, and they are kind of similar to how we experience the world, where we are visual animals. We see things, and oh god, now I'm getting the phone call, of course.
I hope it's not also about Thanos.
I hope so. Oh, that would be bad, because despite my shirt, I do not yet have any spider-based powers. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm still connected. You can still hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. Okay,
Great.
just checking, because my phone went off. But yeah, so those are jumping spiders. They're visual animals. But if you look at a widow spider, a black widow or the false widows, their eyes are really small compared to that of a jumping spider. They are more like a typical spider, where they have small little dot eyes on their head, and they do have 8 of them, but they're not very large, and they aren't really they don't see in very high resolution. It's very blurry, and the animal uses it mostly to detect motion and moving shadows of looming predators. But that doesn't mean that they don't have amazing senses. It just means that they use different senses than vision. So black widows and other spiders that live on webs are living in a world that is primarily vibration and air movement. So they are feeling through their legs sitting on their web the vibrations of those webs. And without seeing where anything is, they can tell, okay, did something hit my web? How fast are its wings beating? Okay, it's probably safe to go eat. I'm going to go over there. Or it's dangerous, I should stay away. Or there's a rush of winds coming at me. That might be a predator about to swoop in. I'm going to dodge. So they do have these wonderful senses. They are just so different from our own. It's really difficult for us to appreciate them on the same level. So I know people often like to say that jumping spiders are really smart and perceptive animals, and they are, except that they are smart in the same way that we are. They're good at figuring stuff out and spotting things and planning routes through an environment. But black widow spiders and many other spiders are also really smart at things that we have almost zero ability at. Sensing your world entirely through vibration, building a web by instinct, basically. So they have all these really cool abilities that we may take for granted because they're so different from our own.
Speaking of abilities, if you could write, and I guess I'll bring Justin in for this as well. If you could write a Black Widow story, what would you want to see her doing, especially from like a spider standpoint? Do you think there would be abilities that spiders have that would be good for a Black Widow story?
I'll let Justin go first if you'd like to, because I do want to think about this. Because I've thought about like Spider-Man takes, but let me think about the Black Widow one.
Well, that's the sad thing about the comics with Black Widow in it right now is she's had a couple of miniseries. She died recently. She got better. It's clones. It's comic books. That's how it goes. But for most of her existence, she's just been the sort of stereotypical angry Russian spy in a cat suit that shows up in somebody else's book to call them an idiot and do something cool and then go somewhere else. So if I were to write or commission to have written a Black Widow story, I would like something that focuses on her personality, something that tries to show the struggle that she has with her past, because she did start as a legitimate villain. She also found out roughly 10 years ago that all of her memories of growing up and being a ballerina and actually having a childhood were false. They were implanted by the Red Room Project. So, just something of substance, because there hasn't been a lot, and that's sad. She's a cool character.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. And I was curious, since there are so many spider and insect characters in the Marvel universe, have there ever been team ups with Black Widow and say Spider-Man?
Oh, sure. like I said, when she debuted that new costume and her web or widow's line, the grappling hook, that was in a Spider-Man book because they were doing the comparison of Spider-Man and Black Widow. So she's teamed up with them. She's teamed up with all the Avengers. She's teamed up with Daredevil, who's best friends with Spider-Man. She's not really associated with any. So
yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Justin.
Movies.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Justin, but I could sort of make out a little bit about what you were talking about. I was surprised in going through Black Widow comic stories that she had such a historied romance with Daredevil. I had no idea that was. I knew a little bit about Hawkeye, but the Daredevil thing was very surprising to me. But it sounded like that was a long-term thing. Dr. Echeverri, have you gotten a chance to think about maybe what would your perfect Black Widow story maybe could be?
I've tried to think about something that would bring in like more of the biology of the spider, but I also don't want to. And like my first response would be like, okay, she could get some cool powers that are similar to the spider that she's based on, but Black Widow is part of the reason that she's cool is that she does all these things without having superpowers. And so I think that I know that she has had some, I guess that there are one cool thing that maybe would be an interesting thing to talk about spider ecology in general would be to have a storyline where they're, instead of teaming up the different arachnid themed and insect themed superheroes, would have some sort of battles against each other because in real life, arachnids are actually often really strong predators of other arachnids. So there are many spiders, including jumping spiders, which are particularly adapted to going after other spiders. So that might be an interesting, at least from a action-based situation, to see how all the different arachnid superheroes and supervillains kind of wash out against each other and see if it matches up with how they would in real life.
Yeah, so it sounds like she maybe needs an arachnid big bad, like an arch nemesis. Justin, is there anything like that maybe in Black Widow's story or in Marvel Comics where there's like there's Spider-Man, there's the Wasp, there's Ant-Man. Are there any bad guys who are spiders as well?
There's a handful. There's like the Tarantula.
Oh yeah, that's right.
A Spider-Man villain. But it's funny you say that, Doctor, because there was a story about 3 years ago in the Amazing Spider-Man, the current series, called Hunted. Yeah. And it was a sequel to Kraven's Last Hunt. But the whole gimmick of that was Kraven the Hunter gathered all the animal and spider and insect and arachnid, all the themed villains in the Spider-Man universe, trapped them inside Central Park under an unbreakable bubble, and made them all try to fight to the death.
Oh, wow.
Gee. It was a fun time.
That's kind of what I was thinking in terms of like, not necessarily a story-based thing, but a really cool action series. That does sound very Kraven.
Yeah, wasn't it? And the whole goal was to get Spider-Man to murder him because he didn't want to be alive anymore. Because Kraven's messed up in the head.
I was wondering if it was he wanted to see who was the strongest and then defeat them to prove that he was. But I guess not.
Yeah, no. Kraven's crazy.
So that's called Hunted?
Hunted, yeah. That was the arc, and it was Amazing Spider-Man, I want to say roughly issue 16 through 23.
Okay.
I might check that out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
it was a good time.
That does sound pretty cool. Well, I guess if we could write a Black Widow story, maybe we would try to come up with another, maybe a female spider who was maybe an arch nemesis to Black Widow. Are female Black Widow? Well, I guess here's my ignorance, Dr. Echeverri. Are all Black Widow spiders female, or are they sometimes male?
Yeah, I wish I had mentioned that earlier. So that's part of the origin of the name Black Widow. Black is based on the shiny black coloration. But the idea of widow refers to a actually relatively common thing in spiders, which is basically before or after mating, the female will eat the male, and how often that happens varies between different groups of spiders. In the widow spiders, it's particularly common, and in some cases, the males will actually basically offer themselves up to be eaten after they mate with the female. And while this seems kind of ridiculous that this has evolved, like why would an animal evolve to specifically die? After mating, the males, it's advantageous to the male to basically give a meal to the female so that she can produce more eggs that he's the father of. So while spiders don't necessarily often stick around to raise the eggs, so there are some really cool exceptions, in this case, male widows can contribute to their offspring with their own life. So they make that sacrifice. And if you watch them in mating, often the male does not try to even get away and the female attacks him like in other spiders. He will often literally, like, they will mate and he will just either like basically put himself at her fangs and wait for her to eat him, and therefore hopefully increase the number of children that he has. So it's this evolutionary adaptation that's actually happened in a couple other groups of orb weaving spiders. And where this occurs, you see this really interesting thing where the females, which are often already larger than male spiders, but they grow, the difference in sizes increases. So you end up having, male spiders that are like this big, and then a female spider that's like relatively that big. I wish spiders were this big, that'd be cool. And so you see that in widow spiders, you see that in the golden silk orb weaver spiders, which are actually pretty decently big in leg span. That's the Trichonephila genus. That we have them in kind of the southern United States, but they're also worldwide. And I know it's in other groups of spiders as well, where you get this extreme difference in size, this extreme sexual dimorphism between male and female. And that is the origin of the name widow, of an animal where all the females are based on this kind of us imposing this really human idea of like monogamous marriage relationships. They're all widows because their partners have always passed away after mating, which is, that's says more about human society and culture than how the spider views things, because the male spider often willingly gives his life for the female, or to feed the female. But it's a cool bit of natural history.
Yeah, that is very, very different from what we would consider to be a typical relationship between humans. But I guess that sort of lines up with the Black Widow character in the comics, because I and Justin, you'll have to help me with this. I think I read an Ultimate Avengers trade paperback one time, and I guess she's sort of like it in the movies, and even in her first appearance, she sort of plays up her femininity, with Tony Stark and things like that. So I could see the Black Widow part of her being the part of her that is the assassin that kind of latches on to some of the men.
Oh, sure. The Ultimate Universe, too, that's a separate universe. That's the one where Miles Morales came from, and he just sort of got drafted into the regular Marvel Universe. And the Ultimate version of Black Widow actually ended up being a villain and attempting to kill the rest of the Ultimate Avengers.
Oh, whoops.
So
it fit pretty well.
Yeah. I think that checks out. So do the Black Widow spiders? You talked about how spiders will sometimes fight other spiders. Do Black Widows fight each other? Do these female spiders go up against each other?
No. So the Black Widow spiders, like many other orb weaving spiders that build, or web building spiders in general, their quote unquote territory is where they set up their web. And so if another spider were to fall into that web, they might try to eat it, but they are staying within their territory, their web, and they're not going out to find the web of another Black Widow and attack it. Though there are certainly groups of spiders that specifically go to the web of another spider, find that spider, and then eat it. Because it is that is a source of food for some spiders. They're specialized to do that. It's really interesting to see those sort of things play out within these kind of one group of animals, I guess.
Okay, so if I were to write a Black Widow story and I had one of the Black Widows, like Natasha, fight the other Black Widow, would that be weird? Would that be inaccurate?
I mean, there's only so much that we can match, biology to a human character, right?
Sure.
So there is certainly if one Black Widow fell into the web of another, right? Like got messed up in the plot or the life of another Black Widow, they might be bitten and attacked, right? So that might be, if you want to really play that up, it could be one Black Widow is kind of interloping into the life of another, and that might be a reason for conflict. Though in real life, these animals would often, certainly barring mishaps, which I know happen a lot in comics, speak for themselves. So there is definitely an angle for that to be an actual interaction that the animals would have in nature. Yeah.
I think we just wrote a Black Widow story. I don't know who we need to contact to make that pitch, but I think we wrote.
Y'all are welcome to it.
we just gave you a free idea.
Inspired by Bama Bugfest. That's all.
Yes. Let's see. We have a comment that says, once found a green anola, or some people say green anole, caught in a Black Widow's web, and
Yeah.
green and those are kind of little. I don't know if I'm technically saying it correctly, but they're little lizard-like creatures.
Yeah, like yay big or so. I mean, there's a whole variation of them, but yeah, like about that big. And Black Widows are one of the spiders that, like I said, their venom does seem to work a lot better on vertebrates. So animals with backbones like lizards and mammals, and especially a small one like a lizard. I mean, to us, that lizard is like the size of like one of our fingers, right? But that the animal is small enough that the widow is able to subdue it with its venom and eat it. And yeah, they fall in, the widow will go after it.
Very interesting. I would not have thought like lizards and things like that would have been caught in a spider web, but I guess anyway.
Yeah, there's a whole paper, actually, a scientific paper on records of vertebrate animals being eaten by spiders and the different types of spiders that regularly eat vertebrates. So that ranges from fishing spiders, which eat fish, and tadpoles and small frogs, to actually, there's a photo out there of a jumping spider with a small frog in its mouth, and it's quite impressive. And one of the most, I would guess say the most common, now maybe not the most common, because probably the small mammals would be the most common, but things like birds do sometimes get eaten by spiders, though it is not, oddly enough, by the big tarantulas that are sometimes called bird-eater tarantulas, but instead by the really big orb-weaving spiders like the golden silk orb weaver, the Trichonephila, which we mentioned earlier. The spider leg span is about yay big, and their webs can be huge. And those spiders are big enough to actually catch small birds like hummingbirds in their webs and eat them. And that's one of the more common ways that birds end up being the predator of spiders. The more often they are the ones eating the spiders. There's a really funny picture out there of like a toucan like flipping a tarantula in its beak and catching it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is wild. So I guess I have two. We're kind of getting close to time to wrap this up. But I have two questions, I guess, for each of you as we wrap this up. So yeah. I guess to Justin, since you've shared your comic book knowledge with us, I kind of want to ask you about your experience with actual Black Widow spiders. Have you ever encountered one?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I'm slightly biased against spiders. I find them incredibly creepy, and I don't like them. They're fine as long as they're far away from me. So if I have been around one, I didn't know it, and I might have smushed it. Couldn't say.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes when if you can't see them really well.
Yeah. But
yeah.
I tend to try and stay out of dark, creepy corners just for anything that might be in them. I've seen too many scary movies.
That's a smart idea. Yeah, the only time I've encountered a Black Widow myself was, I remember as a child very vividly. I was at someone else's house swimming in the pool, and I was very young. But someone told me, "Hey, you got to get out. There's a Black Widow spider in the pool." And I just remember, like, sort of freaking out, having to rush to get out of the pool because it sounded like a very dangerous thing. So I can understand your hesitancy with some of those creepy crawlies. I totally get that. And Dr. Echeverri, since you've talked to us about spiders, I kind of wanted to flip it on you to ask, when did you first encounter the character of Black Widow in the comics?
I actually did not know that Black Widow had appeared with Spider-Man back in the day. I think the first like real good memory, I was aware of Black Widow kind of peripherally, but the first time that I remember seeing the character was actually in the MCU Avengers movies, and that's kind of the incarnation of the character that I had in my head. And certainly it's, had heard the name but didn't know very much about them beforehand. So it was really fun today to learn about the history and how it's changed throughout the years.
Yeah, that's always really fun to learn about comic book characters, because they do. I mean, comic books to me are a little bit. I love comic books, and I also love soap operas, and to me they're almost kind of the same genre because they're so long lasting, and they have different stories all the time. Characters are changing, so that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I sort of think comic books are sort of like soap operas, and I love it.
Oh, I totally see that.
So you can always find a version of Black Widow that might line up to something you like. So I think that's really cool. Black Widow, I think for me was sort of introduced through the MCU as well, and I went back to read the Ultimate Avengers and all of that. So I need to go back and learn more about her in the comics. And so, Justin, I guess that's kind of where my last question to you goes is, what would you want people to take away from the character of Marvel's Black Widow?
Honestly, at this point, it's just an interesting sort of take on the strength of the movies and how much they do affect comics, because the movies have been so popular that Black Widow is more popular now than she's ever been. Before the first Iron Man, nobody would have thought that Iron Man would be the leader of any Marvel movie ever. He was a C-list character who was known for being an alcoholic. That was his biggest thing. And so now with Scarlett Johansson being Black Widow in the Avengers and the popularity of that character, we're starting to see more and more books with Black Widow in it. And that's great to see. It's good to see these characters getting more and more exposure, because that leads to better stories. So the biggest takeaway is just not just for Black Widow, but for that sort of character in general. If there's something you like in the movie, or if there's a character that you like in the books, be vocal about it. And the more people who are asking for these characters that are underutilized, the more likely that they are to have more utilization.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see how comics influence the movies, and then the movies sometimes will influence the comic books. I've found that to be the case. And I just want to, remind everybody that if you can, go support your local comic book shop. The comic strip in Tuscaloosa is available on Instagram and Facebook. Are y'all on Twitter as well, or just Instagram and Facebook?
I think we might have a Twitter, but I haven't used it.
Okay. Well, in any case, follow them on all their social media and try to go and check it out, and maybe get some Black Widow stories or some Avengers comics while you're there at the comic strip. So go support your local comic book shop. And Dr. Echeverri, what would you want to leave people with in terms of Black Widow spiders? What would you like if people watching this could only take away one thing? What would you tell them?
Yeah, if there was one thing that I could say about Black Widow spiders, is that they are no more dangerous than many, many other animals that you deal with in your regular life and are not affected by. So they have a really horrible reputation in the media. You see a news article and they're talked about as this deadly spider, where they haven't been the cause of fatalities for decades. And on an average year, yeah, people get bit by them. And often the time, those bites don't even have any venom in them. And so that you get bit, but you just have the physical bite and nothing else. And even when people have been bitten with venom, there are no lasting injuries if you just go to the doctor, like if something else was serious were to happen to you. The spider bites in general are something that we don't have a lot of experience identifying as your everyday person. And a lot of the times they're misidentified, and you end up with images on TV or in the news, or especially if you Google, of these like really horrible looking rashes or skin conditions that are, if when doctors actually went and checked what is the cause of this, the vast majority of them ended up being from infections, not the bite itself, whether or not it was a spider. And so the culprit there isn't the spider, it's just that you were outside, something poked you, be it a bush or an insect, or maybe a spider if the animal was feeling threatened, and then you didn't wash that area and it got infected, which can happen for many reasons. So the spiders out there, they're just hanging out, they're doing their own thing. As we talked about, black widow spiders stay in their webs for the vast majority of the time. They just hang out there, and they're easy to identify. And so even though they're not dangerous, I understand why people might be worried about them. You don't want to take a risk of interacting with them. The good news, the spider would be very happy if you left it alone too. Think about it. You are a skyscraper-sized being compared to a spider. And the spider is aware of that. It is aware of your size. It is aware of how heavy your footfalls are on the ground. It feels that vibration. And so their response is going to be to run away, because they know that even though their venom is pretty strong and it might be able to subdue a little lizard, it doesn't work on a skyscraper. And so biting is always a last resort when the animal is physically restrained against your skin. So if you leave the black widow alone, it'll just keep on doing its thing, being a cool spider in the environment, and you can observe it at a safe distance or just leave. They're not going to leave their web to come after you.
Yeah, there's an old philosophy quandary about, if you see a spider in your bathroom or in your house or something like that, do you pick it up and move it, or do you leave it alone? And I guess the correct answer is, what I'm hearing is, just leave it alone, let it do its thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to move it, that's fine. I want to accept that, arachnophobia is a real condition that people have. We have been trained and told since we were little kids, like your experience, oh my God, a spider is in this pool, everyone freak out and run away. And that gets ingrained in us. I'm scared of slugs. They creep me out. They're really cool animals. I just prefer not to hold them, even though I'll take photos of them and stuff.
Sure.
And everyone has something that is startling to them. So if you would like to remove that, if you don't want that animal in your house, if it happened to get in, that's a valid feeling to have. But I would, I guess, want to add that is not enough of a reason to kill the animal just for the crime of you having a phobia about it. You can use a little, like a cup and a piece of paper, or 2 cups, to relocate spiders outside your house. And web building spiders like orb weavers will find a place out there, they'll set up, and they'll probably catch more food out there, so they'll be happy. So if that's something that if that is a fear or something that happens to you, that's okay. You can move the spider without hurting it.
That's a good tip, in case anybody ever needs to do that. It's a good tip.
And I will say one last tip about that, because it's something that has come up. When you're trying to move a spider around, my advice to you to catch them is to always move slowly and gently. Quick, startling movements like that are most likely to scare the spider, and it will scamper off in a direction, which will startle you. And then the spider's gone off, it's scared. You don't know where the spider is, you're scared. spiders are really sensitive to movement and fast vibrations and like air movement. But if you move slowly and you slowly collect the spider in a vial or a cup or a Tupperware, whatever, you're far more likely to get it in there without startling it, and then you can relocate it safely. That's the actual advice is that. Because also, if you want to catch a spider to like look at it, very helpful, because it took me a while to learn how to catch spiders for my job, and that was one of the biggest things is you cannot outspeed them. You have to move slowly.
Ah, very, very good tip. That would not be something I would have known on my own. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for our time here today. So thank you for joining us for Bama Bugfest on the web. Content for Bama Bugfest is always going to appear at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 4 p.m. And then we have a daily wrap up at 7 p.m. So if you have any more questions that we didn't get today, we may, if you had questions and we didn't get a chance to answer them for this hour, we may be able to get them for the daily wrap up. So all of those times, 10, 2, 4, and 7 are Central Standard Time. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the time. So if you weren't able to join us live, you can always go back and rewatch them on YouTube and Facebook after we finish. So keep that in mind as well. So you can always go to YouTube and Facebook to see anything that we were live about. We also have a handy resource guide. So if you have any things that you want to go and check out, we have some links. So if you go to bamabugfest.org, there's a link to the resource guide. So we have more links if you want to learn more about Black Widow the character, or if you want to learn more about Black Widow spiders, we've got links there as well. So if you want to go check that out, you can. If you want to check out more about Dr. Echeverri and his work, you can go to spiderdaynightlive.com, which is still a fantastic website name. So you can find all of his social media accounts there as well. So go and check him out. And if you wanted to keep in touch with our Black Widow who came by today, you can go check her out. She is on Instagram @_Andrea Towers. And she also has, I guess I could plug it while we're here. Andrea has also written a book that includes some thoughts about Black Widow as well. So if you want to go check that out, she wrote a book called Geek Girls Don't Cry, the real life lessons from fictional female characters. So Black Widow is included in that. So I highly recommend it if you want to read more about Black Widow from our Black Widow from today. All right. Well, you can check out everything at bamabugfest.org. Just if you have a question about full events and a list of places to access all of our content, go check it out there. And as always, we want to thank our collaborating partners for making this event happen. And thank you to our guests today for sharing a little bit of your time and expertise with us. Really appreciate the ability to combine science and spiders and comics. It's very unique and it's very fun. All right. We'll see you all next time on Bama Bugfest on the web.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.